Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan. We are in April, ready to start pecking away at this NFL draft, going through positions by positions. We told you in our last podcast, which I'll talk about really briefly with Adam for a second, that we were going to start kind of positional breakdowns with wide receiver, because we know that that's the position that everybody, including the Eagles and their fans, are focused on. So this pod will be dedicated. Adam and I have spent, I guess since the last pod came out, Adam, talking to scouts, coaches, some higher level executives as well, gathering as much intel as we can get on wide receivers so that we can probably give the best assessment of all these guys now that we're coming around the home stretch.
Yeah, good to be with you, Geoff, and everyone. Hope everyone's staying safe. Be better to be safe than sorry. Don't take any risks. My wife and I have not been out other than to take a walk around the block or walk a couple-mile walk that we do every other day. We have not been to the supermarket, and we're going to go 3 weeks without going to the supermarket.
Nice.
You just got to do it. Now, my wife was smart, Geoff. She I'm going to say when I got back from the combine, she went immediately to she probably spent $1,000 on groceries, where I said, I wasn't happy about it, but I'm like, all right, we'll see. God forbid something happens. And guess what? This is where we're at. So stock up. That's the next time we go, we're going to stock up for another 2 to 3 weeks and try to be safe.
Well, as we do every show, Adam, or at least we have been doing, I want to start off by thanking everybody in the healthcare industry, law enforcement, essential businesses that are open, as you mentioned, supermarkets, delivery places, restaurants, teachers, people still out there hustling and working to make sure that their fellow citizens are taken care of. So we thank everybody involved in that, and we wish everybody great health, and we'll get through this together. Also, we got great reaction from our last podcast, mainly because of Adam going off on some tangents. And so we do want to thank a lot of the people. Now, for every 10 or 11 or 12 either text, tweets, emails, or whatever about how much they loved your passion, Adam, we got maybe one that would say, hey, my kids listen to this podcast.
Well, I told you I was worried about that, and I felt terrible when I was done. In fact, I'll be honest with you, folks. I had trouble sleeping. Jeff knows me fairly well. We've become good friends over the last couple of years, but I usually don't. I'm pretty calm, pretty level-headed. But I'm sick and tired of the nonsense with the bad reporting. I wouldn't call it reporting, just these fake reporters on Twitter. And it's just gotten out of hand. So I let those people have it one way or the other. And I appreciate our friends at Crossing Broad writing a nice blog. I didn't expect that. Look,
well, I can say this, Adam. I mean, I don't ever want your passion, my passion, the listeners who appreciate that passion to have themselves and ourselves censored. But we do understand that there are children listening. So what we can do in the future is, if we have a pod like that where we feel that there's language that might not be suitable for kids, we can put that in the alert.
Good idea.
We can put that in the write-up and tweet it out like a little NSFW for those, just so that people know. We're not going to stop being us, but we can help people know. I could not
believe, Geoff, the comments on my mentions on Twitter and also on our ITB feed on Twitter, and our emails. Like you said, let's say we got 75 to 100 comments. I saw 2 that none were completely negative. One got pissed off. Well, the guy's funny. He's like, look, the rant was great, but let's get back to not doing this for an hour and 10, whatever the guy said. And I didn't respond to the guy, but the guy's right. I felt bad that it went that long, and we're going to get right into it. But that was one. That'll never happen again, but I got it off my chest. And it seemed like people used to agree with me. And by the way, Jeff's partially responsible. He egged me on. So
completely guilty and proud of it is what I'm going to say. All right. I want to update. We've got a lot of new listeners over the past month or two. I can tell just by our listens. So we thank everybody for hopping aboard. So now's a good time to remind everybody that our podcasts in the off season drop every Monday and Thursday at 6 a.m. So just for those who are new to us, that's our schedule. It changes during the season, but for now,
Eastern time, right?
Eastern time. That's a great point, because we have a lot of listeners from across the country and the globe. So Monday and Thursday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. But you can still catch all of our last podcasts on whatever podcast platform that you listen to, and we've put them all up, uploaded them all onto our YouTube channel as well. So please check out Inside the Birds on YouTube, and please become a subscriber. Also, ask us a question through the review. If you give us a 5-star review on whatever platform you use, you can also ask us a question. And if you give us a 5-star review and ask a question, I promise you we will answer it. That's our deal to you. You give us a 5-star review, you write up something nice, and I promise we will answer that question. And secondly, please visit our website, insidethebirds.com. We're updating it with not just our podcast and our YouTube, but also a lot of writing, me, Adam, and also Andrew DeCecco, who breaks down a lot of college and pro prospects on all 22. So insidethebirds.com, Inside the Birds YouTube, and of course, Inside the Birds podcast. And if you got any other time left, you can check out my Phillies podcast, which is Powder Blue podcast that I do with Frank Close and Hunter Brody. And you can find that Twitter account at Powder Blue Phils. Inside the Birds, of course, is on Twitter at Inside Birds. And now for the really special announcement. I'm really excited to say this. I don't know if we have the date etched in stone yet, but we have gotten Greg Cosell, who's a good friend of Adam's, a friend of mine, and one of the most respected guys in TV and scouting there is going to be on one of our podcasts leading up to the draft. So maybe about a week and a half or two. As we get closer to the draft, we're going to have Greg come on and break down all the names that we've associated with the Eagles in the first few rounds. And he's going to be, listen, he's one of the most informative guys there is, Adam. I know that you have a great deal of respect for him, and I do too. And I think so will our listeners.
Yeah, I've known Greg since 2003. I know him through Ron Jaworski. And in terms of, I trust him more than anyone who has not coached or played in the National Football League. He technically works for the NFL, but nevertheless, it's because it's through his tape study. He's not influenced by anything other than what he sees on tape. And the good thing about Greg is, because he talks to some of the same people I do, he tries to learn where the game is going through coaches. You know, I've had these talks with him, and he's come on my show with John Hansen. We do a fantasy show, which we've done for Sirius XM since 2004. John brings him on with us every Friday. He's done that now for like 12 years, something like that. And it's great because those of us who play fantasy, I know you and I do, he doesn't play fantasy, but he gets it. So we glean so much from fantasy because he understands numbers and he likes analytics. He's into that. Though he always grades by tape. Tape's way more important than analytics, but he wants to know numbers. So, and we'll get him on. We'll firm this up with him. But he's just very accurate. I mean, his accuracy over the years. It's impossible when you've graded 10,000 players in your career to get them all right. It's literally impossible. As we know, no NFL GM's ever gotten 100% correct. Right. People point out a couple that he's gotten wrong over the years. But folks, he's the most accurate person I've ever come in contact with who does not work for an NFL team or was never played in the league. It's pretty remarkable. And he learned from Jaws, and he's been grading coaching tape for well over 30 years.
Well, I'm excited to have him on, and excited to dive into wide receivers because, again, I know that's what everybody wants to know, the breakdown. So let's get some like facts out of the way before we talk about receivers in general, Adam, as far as where teams and especially the Eagles are in the process. So I was told that this last week is where a lot of the scouts and the meetings between just scouts have taken place and wrapped up, and the information has been shared. And this week, at least for the Eagles, Adam, is when the coaches now will get involved and they're going to, obviously a lot of these meetings are going to take place using either Zoom or Skype or however,
Microsoft Teams.
Or that too. Yeah, right. Yeah. But that's an important fact I think we should share with people, right? Because I jokingly refer to this time, although I'm half serious, as the time when the scouts' work is done and then the coaches get to have their say. And then that really has almost more of an impact on the GMs and the decision makers than the scouts who spent the whole year looking at them, because coaches tend to get favored a little bit more. But this is a big week for the Eagles and a lot of teams in that regard.
Yeah, so this is their final scouting meeting. For the Eagles, I know they start as we drop this on Monday. I know it starts Monday. And as you said, the coaches will be involved. And we'll see. We'll see what we'll probably learn as we go along how much of a coach's influence have. But I know Howie Roseman was not happy with the insinuation that Schwartz has a lot to do with some of these defensive players being signed. I get what he means, but the fact of the matter is, Jim Schwartz over time, he runs a specific scheme, and they like to get him players who fit their scheme and certain characteristics. Every every defensive coordinator would tell you he wants players that are smart. That's obvious. But particularly in the way that they play the back end of their defense, because the corners must be, when you play the wide nine, the corners are going to be asked to tackle more. And if they don't tackle well, they're not going to go on the field. You could be a high-skilled player in the back end, but if you don't tackle well, Schwartz won't play him. So that's just the way the wide nine is.
Right.
It's a scheme that no one really runs it anymore, like Jim does. But you know what? It's hard to argue with the team's overall success. But this is, as we've been telling people, well before free agency started, there's going to be adjustment in this front. Certain things they're going to do, and particularly the rotation and the thought process and the strategy, but the matchups that they're going to get, because the personnel is better, Geoff, and obviously the coaching that Jim has added on defense is going to be pretty good.
Right, and I think it'll be interesting from our standpoint, Adam, to find out maybe closer to or even after the draft about how much influence a guy like Aaron Moorhead, who's just in his first few months as Eagles wide receivers coach, and again, a lot of this stuff being done through technology, right? Just how powerful his voice will be in his first draft as Eagles wide receivers coach, because they brought him in because they felt like he had good experience as a player and coaching in the college ranks, and they really liked him, and they felt he would get on and be a really good coach. So we'll see how powerful his voice is when it comes to evaluating prospects.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Well, I'm sure he's going to have a voice because he played in the league. He also had a coaching internship, I believe, with the Colts. Someone told me to work with him.
Okay.
I talked to one of the coaches at Vanderbilt who worked with him, spoke very highly of him. He's got tremendous presence. That's the early word from inside the Eagles building. But again, he's been barely here because everyone's been kicked out of the NovaCare.
Right.
Unfortunately. So, let me ask you this question as we're going to start, not all Eagle fans are listening, so we're also going to play this on a broader spectrum, but let me ask you this question as we get started. The Eagles currently own 21. If they didn't go receiver there, which would be certainly a shock, but if they didn't, do you have a position you think they'd look at?
Oh, man. I have this written down as a note for us to talk about maybe as we lead up to the draft, because I didn't want to
just curious. Yeah,
too far. But
because it's going to start me off doing these receivers here.
I would say this, and this is from my own opinion, but also opinion of talking with people who I respect in the know. And I would say you're right that wide receiver clearly is just on best player available alone, because this is such a great wide receiver class that it's going to be difficult for them to pick at 21 and not have a wide receiver be their highest rated prospect. So you're not reaching, right? But
I don't know about that. That's why I asked.
But you got to let me get the butt in.
Go ahead.
But there's 20 picks ahead of them, and there's going to be 4 quarterbacks, and there's going to be 5 or 6 offensive tackles, and a couple of those great linebackers, and a couple of corners, and all of a sudden you got more guys than 20, right? So that could force the drop of a really good offensive lineman or a really good pass rusher. And if that were to happen, yes, I could see the Eagles taking an offensive lineman or a pass rusher ahead of a wide receiver.
Yeah, so the reason why I brought that up, Geoff, is just what you said. I want people to understand that, in a there's a high probability the Eagles are going to take receiver in the first, and they're going to get at least 2 out of this draft. Now, here's another little thought. Howie Roseman's been on record, so I'm not saying that he hasn't talked about, at least publicly, but I know for a fact they want more picks. They have 8 right now. They love to have more picks, whether they can get those 2 back that they traded away. Even if it's an extra 6th, that would help them if they could get another 5 and a 6. Because let's say, Geoff, they get their guy in the first, they take a receiver in the first, but they don't, let's say they're going to draft one in the second or third, and the guys that they want are gone, so they don't reach. They go with the next highest graded player on their board. For instance, let's say you're on your grading system, it's 1 to 10, and they've got 6 players at a 7, and they've got a receiver right around there at 6.7. Do they go with the receiver who's got a slightly lower grade, or do they go with the highest graded player? And that to me is something teams that reach, teams that don't know what they're doing. I'm not saying the Eagles do this, but I know there are teams who don't go by the board. They get so concerned because they're so depleted at a position, they draft for need and they miss.
Right. That's true. So, but again, if the Eagles draft for need at 21, quote unquote need, and take a receiver, it's probably going to be a guy who is looked at, even if it's not Judy or Lamb, and we'll get into it, even if it's any of the next 5 or 6 guys. My conversations are with scouts are that any one of those guys is a good first or early second round pick.
Now, who are we talking about though when you say that?
Let's get into that. So we'll get into our receivers.
Okay,
right now.
let's do it.
I like the way you did this because I wanted to do it the exact same way, and that's kind of divide it into tiers because there's some guys I don't think that we need to talk a whole lot about. A, because they probably won't be reachable, and B, because everybody knows how good they are, right? But we'll get into everyone. Just spend some more time on the guys who have more either relatability to the Eagles or question marks. So tier 1 is Jerry Jeudy from Alabama and CeeDee Lamb from Oklahoma. They're Jeudy should be a top 10 pick. And as you mentioned, CeeDee Lamb, probably a top 15. Wouldn't shock me if he went top 10. Jeudy is the guy, Adam, he has everything the twitchiness that they talk about with wide receivers is what makes him elite. He on any route that breaks, in, out, double move, comeback, button hook, anything you name, stick, nod, right? He's got the type of slippery ability that he can stack a corner in 1,000 different ways.
So, Geoff, this is interesting. So one team I spoke to over this past weekend, they're split on Jeudy and Lamb, according to a high-ranking team source for a team. And the guy said, look, Judy's interviews were terrific. He goes, look, if you watch his tape, it's not close in terms of the whole package, and you kind of mentioned that. The one concern this guy had, he said, look, he's got to put on weight. He goes, he's a little bit lean, where CeeDee Lamb is stronger physically. That's where Lamb is better than Jeudy. But Jeudy, in terms of the overall picture, route running, like we haven't seen in years. People bring up Amari Cooper being maybe one of the NFL's best route runners. This kid is right up there, ironically, same school. He's a stud. He's a true number 1 receiver. Here's the great thing about Jeudy, Geoff. So if you're listening to us, you're a fan of one of the top 5 top 5 picks, what a team that's in there, and that's probably where he's going to go in the top 5. The great thing is he could line up at X, Y, or Z. He's line up everywhere. He's caught a lot in the slot. They run a pro-style offense at Alabama. That's a good thing. He can handle anything, and the great thing is he runs the full route tree. So the kid's a special football player, but he does need to put some weight on, Geoff. That was the one thing that this guy said to me. He goes, man, he goes, the thing that we won't have is an offseason. He's 6'1", 193, ran a 4.45. He placed about a 4.3, 4.4 on tape. That's the one thing you're going to hear us say throughout our analysis here, Geoff. So that's what we got on Jerry Jeudy.
Now, you really think he's going to go top 5? Because I feel like
potentially,
if Burrow goes 1, I feel like somebody trades up to 2 for Tua, and then the Lions pick at 3, and they're either going to trade out for somebody trading up for a quarterback, or they're going to probably take Chase Young. So
I mean, look, but what I'm saying is Judy's the kind of guy that Jeudy and Lamb are close in terms of talent. Just that Judy's more of a fluid mover. Right. If you're a receiver needy team and you really are dying to have them and you're picking close, you're not too far away. You may want to trade up, but yeah, I could buy it that he doesn't go to the top 5. It really depends on what the Dolphins do. The Giants aren't taking one. Lions aren't taking one. Redskins are. Do they need one? Big time. They're almost as bad as the Eagles are, except for obviously McLaurin. McLaurin's a stud, but they're gonna go. They have to go Chase Young. I mean, that's just they don't have any choice. If Ron Rivera, if he keeps it, and he's a defense, obviously he has personnel control. I'm told. Right. If he passes on Chase Young, then there's something wrong. So I think realistically, Jeudy will go to. I think he goes early. Quite frankly, as late as 9 to Jacksonville. The Panthers don't necessarily need a receiver right now because they added Robbie Anderson. Chargers needs, but they wouldn't go. They could use one, but the Jets obviously would not pass on him. I think someone would trade up if Jeudy drops to the back of the top 10. I got to think they're going to get calls.
Yeah, I would think so too. Now, I asked a guy, a scout who's done it for a long time, high up scout, college scout, what if there's something that's going to push Lamb ahead of Jeudy, or if there's something that would separate the two, what would it be? And he told me he felt that Lamb has a better better hands. He said that he felt that Jeudy he counted 7 drops this year from Jeudy, and a couple of them he said were made you say, quote, what's going on there? Like, it wasn't like it was a difficult catch. So he either just didn't have his focus or whatever. But otherwise, they're both good kids, but they do feel like the two differences, this guy felt the two differences are, one, that Lamb catches everything, whereas Judy had some drops. And then two, Lamb can return punts and Judy doesn't play on any special teams. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But he did admit Judy is the better overall receiver, but Lamb gave you more reliability and special teams prowess.
Yeah, so Lamb at the combine measured 6'1" and 5/8, 198, ran a 4.5. He runs to about a 4.45. A receivers coach told me. Here's this quote from this receivers coach that another person I talked to was a receivers coach. Lamb, so physical, so strong, and can get better, breaks tackles, very serious guy in our interview, freaky talent. Get the comparison to Hopkins, really good comp, close but not quite. Bigger physically than Hopkins. We'll start from day one. He could play X or Z. Don't have to worry about him because he's self-motivated. This kid's special, and he's a guy that if we got him, he will be our leading receiver no matter what. Even with our good tight end, this kid would lead us in catches.
There you go. Good stuff. All right, the next receiver we have is Ruggs. Now, I was tempted to put him bottom first tier. You have him top second tier. I think you're right because there's some distinction there between Judy and CD and then Ruggs. But I do hear people tell me that they wouldn't be surprised if Ruggs went higher just because of the speed alone, the elite speed.
It would shock me, but look, when John Ross went as high as he did, I threw my hands up. I was like, I had teams telling me they didn't have a 1 on him because of his history. But it only takes, I've learned my lesson. It only takes one team to like a player. That's just the reality of the situation. Ruggs is a fascinating player, incredibly explosive, a dynamic with the ball in his hands, probably the most explosive player on tape, I'm told, once he catches it. But the thing that you could kick about Geoff is the lack of production. Just doesn't have a lot.
That's right.
That's concerning. That's why he's in the next tier. My sense is from talking to several coaches and teams about him, he's going to go somewhere in the mid-first round. Tape is not special in any way, but when he catches it, then it becomes special. His rack, as this coach told me, is unbelievable. Not a crisp route runner like Judy, needs work on it. This coach says, I don't know that he'll start year one, needs more work. And this coach said that the issue that we have is we will not be with these players in the offseason. And he needs a little bit more time than Judy, who's special and ready to go. Also, one thing I didn't know, this coach said, if you think Ruggs and Judy are interesting, wait to see the receivers are going to come out of next year.
No, I had the same quote, man. Waddle and Devontae Smith.
Okay, there you go. What are their names again? Give them again.
Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. And to add to what you said, my guy told me he thinks those two guys are better than. By the way, he's not down on Ruggs at all. He basically said what you said. He thinks he's going to go top 15. He thinks the fact that he can return punts and has elite speed is going to push him there. But he said there's no question in his mind that Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith are going to be better. They're going to be at Alabama next year.
All right, another coach chimed in, quote, speed and toughness off the charts. He's a dog. He has no fear. A little concerned about the limited route tree. Never been a featured receiver. That's a problem for us. We're probably going to use him at Z if we draft him. Get him free releases. He interviewed great with us. Much better functional football intelligence with us than Alabama people gave him. We were blown away by how smart he was. Because I think what happens is sometimes teams undersell guys in certain ways. I'm guessing. I don't know for sure. But whatever, I don't know what his Wonderlic was or whatever they thought. Definitely bigger physically because he gets compared to Mecole Hardman and Tyreek Hill. Certainly bigger physically than those two guys.
Yeah.
Hill, a defensive coordinator, told me he's been in the league for many years. He said that Tyreek Hill's the fastest player he's ever seen on tape, faster than Deshaun Jackson. But Rugg with a ball in his hands is close.
Right. So I have very similar. I have what you just said. Elite speed, tough SOB is what he's a tough guy. Like you said, you get the ball in his hands, he can do a few things. And to add to what you said, I'm going to give you a description of what a scout said to me about Ruggs and where it doesn't always translate despite these great speed, right? He said, if you put a cone 30 or 40 yards downfield and had Ruggs and Judy both sprint to the cone and then kind of run around it to show their twitchiness, you would see Ruggs running around the cone a little high and a little tight compared to Judy, who's just going to be all twitched up and smooth and fluid around that cone. And so Ruggs has great straight line speed, and that's probably where the Tyreek Hill comps come in. But as you mentioned with the route tree and just running those sharp breaking routes, that's not his specialty. If you any kind of comeback type route, he's got great hands, but you're just going to see a little bit of tightness in the way he runs that route. And so with that being said, Adam, and what you said, he's projected to kind of go in that 15 to 18. Maybe he falls to 20, 21 where the Eagles are, but do you have any reluctance based on that he wouldn't be a good player?
No, but he's going to need further development. Where Judy walks in day one, like Ruggs' his football smarts are good. That's not the problem. The problem is if you've not been a great route runner or even a good route runner in college, you're going to need time. And again, here's the problem with Ruggs here. So let's say we're right. He goes in the middle of the first round. The earliest I think he goes is to the Raiders, okay, because he's unbelievably fast.
Right.
And the Raiders need speed opposite. I'm told they're looking for speed opposite Tyrell Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem is you're not going to get him probably. We don't know. We're guessing, but most likely the earliest you're going to get him is July. He needs work. They're speed deficient opposite Tyrell Williams. You need him to play right away. They don't have anyone who's ready to play. By the way, also, Nelson Aguilar, I'm told, is going to play on the outside for them, not slot. At least that's their initial plan with Aguilar.
Oh, boy.
I know. Well, their tape, his tape in 17 when he played outside was really good. We know that he was a train wreck last season. But here's the deal, though. If you're the Raiders and you need him to play right away, Geoff, here's the question. I have to talk to the Raiders. I haven't talked to them about the receivers yet. I will at some point soon. But I know this. I'm talking about receivers for the draft here. Not I know how they look at their personnel, but I don't know that he's going to be ready right away to play, to be a starting NFL receiver. I mean, he'll be ready to play football, but if he's ready to be a starting NFL receiver, I don't know that. And that's why these teams that aren't so good that need these guys to play right away, like the Niners. By the way, the Niners, who have 13 overall, God, could they use him opposite Samuel?
Mm-hmm.
So that's and you could, if you're the Niners, you could afford to play him.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, but you could, what I mean is you could bring him along slowly, because slowly is not a word. You could bring him down slowly. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. But you could bring
him as good as one of your F-bombs.
Yeah, that's right. But Geoff, here's the deal with Ruggs. You have to know as a team that if you don't play him early, you're not going to get fired. Because if he's not ready, and you're the Raiders, not that John Gruden's not going anywhere. He's got a 10-year contract. But if you're a team that absolutely needs him to play right away, you may not be able to do that.
Yeah. I don't. Is it going to be impossible to get? I mean, even if he's just running fly routes, I mean, you and I have talked about how important it is for the Eagles to get immediate contribution from their first round pick. I didn't come away feeling that Ruggs was such a project that he can't get on the field right away. I just feel like you're not going to be able to run him on every route right away.
Yes, that might be the case, but the receiver coaches that I talked to were a little bit concerned early on because he's had a limited route tree and he's never been featured.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's another part of this. Like, let's move towards the Eagles. Okay, our show is called Inside the Bird, so I just want to give you some Eagles intel. Let's say they're at 21. Let's say he drops to 15. Eagles traded up for him. We're just giving a trade up scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they don't have a choice. He's got to play. Deshaun is on one side, who's the X receiver, and your Z would be Ruggs. And by the way, Ruggs could probably play the Y slot.
Mm-hmm.
You could have him do that, but again, you're not going to have him for the offseason.
Right.
And, the Eagles are in dire need. They have to, whoever they draft in the first or second round at receiver, they got to play. If they go two receivers in the first two rounds, Geoff, they're playing. Who else do they have?
No, you're right. I think Ruggs would have to play, and I think Doug can at least scheme him to accentuate his strengths as they work. Remember, just to use an example, Miles Sanders did not catch the ball at all at Penn State, except for a little dump off here and there. By week 2 against the Lions, or week 3, I should say, he was lining up in the slot, catching balls 40 yards
incredible.
down.
It's incredible.
Right. So I'm going to trust that at least the coaches, wherever Ruggs needs to get developed, he can get developed in that play here all the way.
Yes, although he was lined up offset and also sometimes in the slot because they had nobody else.
Right.
He had to actually play receiver. And as you said, Remember, was it the Minnesota game? He caught that bomb.
Sanders?
Yeah, he caught a deep
Detroit.
pass.
It was Detroit. He caught two 30-yard passes in week 3. Yeah.
But the bottom line is with this kid, he's going to be fun. He's going to be an interesting study. Like I said, one team told me they were split on him. They were split on the other two kids. But he's going to go third because of his elite speed. I mean, there's no one's going to be drafted ahead of him as a third guy.
Right.
And as you said, you never know. So some team could shock you and draft him high as a 2 guy, but we'll see.
All right, let's move on to Justin Jefferson. I feel like we're going to spend a lot of time on that. And we're already deep into this pod. But
by the way, I was right about Miles Sanders. He had a 45-year catch for. Yeah, he did
against Minnesota.
Yeah, 3 for 86. But you are right.
Yeah, but it was the Detroit game is where he first started to do it, and that was week 3. So I mean, they got him in there early.
And week 6 against Minnesota. See, that's the question. And before we go to the next tier for the Eagles, how are they going to change this? Let's say, for instance, they get two guys who could run in this draft. You got Miles Sanders. You got Deshaun. Arcega-Whiteside's going to be part of the picture, they believe. Mm-hmm. That could be pretty much it. Now, the question would be, do they need to add a veteran? I say yes, either through trade, free agency. They cannot go into whatever training camp they're having, Geoff, without a veteran. How could Deshaun is the one, but I'm talking about someone who could be a possession receiver, someone who you could count on that could stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I know we've talked about how they're not chasing any wide receivers in free agency, and we were correct in that. I still think before it's all said and done, Howie figures out a way to get some speed before not relying just on draft picks. Now, I don't know. I'm not saying he's going out there and trading for some Pro Bowl wideout, but what I'm saying is I'd be shocked if he didn't get somebody that adds a little speed to this offense that's played in the league. That's a veteran.
Okay, all right.
I want to talk. So let's move on to Justin Jefferson. He's next. He's obviously one of the guys that's really linked to the Eagles a lot. But before we talk about him, Adam, I want to tell everybody about our friends from DraftKings. No sports, no problem. DraftKings Sportsbook has an endless amount of casino games to play from the comfort and safety of your home. And right now, all first-time casino players on DraftKings Sportsbook can get up to $200 to play risk-free for the first 24 hours after downloading and signing up. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now and find the casino games in the top navigation bar to start playing. Games, you want games, choose from slots, blackjack, roulette, live dealer games, and more. DraftKings is a legal, safe, and securer than secured gaming app. You can deposit and withdraw your money at your convenience. Plus, DraftKings has new promotions every day, so be sure to check the app daily. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code ITB to play up to $200 of casino games risk-free. That's promo code ITB to play up to $200 risk-free for your first 24 hours of casino play on DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older in New Jersey. Only restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right. I did a lot of homework on Justin Jefferson, Adam, because
so did I.
I know you did too. And I feel like in the past few weeks, the guy's almost getting a bad rap because a lot of people feel that he'll perform better in the slot in the NFL. And it's like, oh, you're just a slot receiver. So let's get into him. I'll start with you on what you've gathered in the last week or two. On anything changed about what you've gathered?
In terms of him, or what do you mean by that? Like,
no, just anything, because we've talked about him obviously being a first round pick and the fact that his timed speed at the combine does not necessarily match the play speed that you see on tape.
Yeah, a couple people got on me about that, but folks,
it's just true.
Not only is it true, the report that I got from receivers coach that I trust, I taped the phone call, I transcribed it. Let me read it to you. Quote, very mature, chip on his shoulder. Last guy to get a scholarship at his class at LSU. 29 slot Y, Z, 28 outside, super smart, good catch radius. Time speed does not match play speed. Mm-hmm. We would probably play him inside. We don't think he's going to be a consistent player on the outside because of his speed. He don't run. He's smooth, Geoff, but he's not explosive in any way. See, this is the problem. I'm not saying, okay, let's talk about, because he's going to go in the 20s most likely. If you're a team that's looking for speed out of the slot, he's really not. He is smooth, though, with the ball, and he runs the daylight pretty well, looking at my notes here, but he's not explosive. So I get it. There's some people are guessing that the Eagles like him. I know for a fact that they do. But he doesn't. Here's what one person told me. There's really a personnel director.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about. I asked him about Philly, and he knows the personnel really well. I said, "Hey, if you were Philly, where would you line up Jefferson, and how would you handle receiver position?" And he asked me about Deshaun being healthy. I said, "Yeah, he's healthy. He's 100% ready to go." He goes, "Well, I wouldn't trust Deshaun Jackson to stay healthy, but let me tell you something. If you line up with Deshaun Jackson and Jefferson in the slot and someone else who could run the other side, you can line up your offense in day one. But that's the problem, as that guy told me. You have to have speed on the outside, or you don't draft Jefferson unless you know you've got speed on the outside. He just defeats the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If you're only going to play him in the slot, from what I'm hearing, that makes him real marginal. So again, he's played on the outside before, but his long-term prospects, Geoff, are to play inside. That puts him in the 20s, if not even lower.
Right. But I think it's important that, that actually is still good when you're drafted in the 20s. And
sure.
So what I would add to that is this. Two different personnel people who've been doing it for a long time told me this. Yes, he is better in the slot. That's where he fits most. However, he has 33-inch arms. And if you go back to his junior year or the year before last year, he did play the outside at LSU and played it productively. I think what we should not get caught up in is just because he's better on the inside does not mean he cannot play the outside. It's just that he's going to win more routes on the inside. I have two people telling me that they think if you move him around to the outside, he has the catch radius, the body control, and what did I just mention? The 33-inch arms to be able to make plays in absence of elite speed. Now, he's not, again, as you're saying, and I'm agreeing with you, that's not where you want him 70% of the time. But if you put him inside, move him outside, say when you're in 12 personnel, you got two tight ends, and then you have Jefferson on one outside and Deshaun or somebody with speed on the other, then you have the makings of a pretty good mismatch if he's up against a number 2 corner. So he can be a productive player when used the right way and worth a first-round pick. And I can see him, put it this way, these are the words of another man, not me, of a scout, right? He's like Nelson Aguilar, but way better. Okay, Nelson was pretty good in 2017.
Well, Nelson
got way better.
Yeah, Nelson was a first-round pick. He became a vertical slot when they finally figured it out with him. And 17, he looked like a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. We know his final 2 years, particularly 2019, were not good. But Justin Jefferson, the thing that coaches like about him, they like that he's pro-ready. He's ready to go. Remember who coached him? He was playing in Joe Brady's offense at LSU.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, his long arms. He has a very good catch radius. He certainly is not an X receiver. He's a Z, and you'd have to move him. He's not going to win on his own, I don't think, a lot on the outside.
Right.
The thing that's people are going to have a problem with, if you play him on the outside, he's going to get separation. The Eagles cannot win after this season. Let's say for argument's sake, Deshaun is gone after 2020. They don't have anyone who could win on the outside. Literally nobody. Mm-hmm. And they're going to have to get that in this draft. They cannot. This is the draft to do it. And by the way, you don't have to be Henry Ruggs to be able to separate on the outside.
Exactly.
We don't want to, like, we're going to get to Ayuk, who I absolutely love, and a receivers coach I'm very, very friendly with. I mean, I had not done a lot of work on him after having this call with this receivers coach. I'm like, oh my God, dude, I got to get on this guy. All right, I get it. Yeah, I get it.
Same here. I got same here. One more thing on Jefferson.
Yeah.
That I asked somebody who's, a scout, been doing a long time, who AFC guy, who he most compares to in the NFL. And he said he felt like and I think you and I have mentioned this name before, Keenan Allen comes to mind when talking about Justin Jefferson. Go check out Keenan Allen's career. 3 Pro Bowls, 1,100 yards, 1,200 yards. He had a 1,393 yard. So you put Carson Wentz and Justin Jefferson on the field together, and I have a feeling you're going to get a pretty productive player.
He'll get open, right? He'll get open, but I'm just telling you, well, we'll see if I'm right. If the Eagles, it'd be a minor surprise. I know he's on their list in that area, and I know he's going to be on there. They'll have a bucket of players, but I don't know. There's no way I'm going to know how they have who's graded higher,
right?
But if you draft him, and I strongly believe, based on what this one guy told me, if you draft Jefferson the first, and you don't have speed on the outside for the long term, you pretty much have to draft a receiver no later in the 3rd round with a guy who could run, because remember, the draft is never, ever about the first year. You hope to get something out of him. It's always about you're looking to have this guy around for 6 to 8 years. And you're projecting, if you draft Justin Jefferson, to you're right, to line up with Wentz, but they've got to have speed opposite Jefferson.
No, it's interesting. I'm looking at Keenan Allen's best year was 2017. He came back from his second injury, and he had 1,400 yards and 6 touchdowns.
He's a great player.
I'm trying to think who the speed was. I guess they had Terrell Williams, right?
Yeah, Tyrell Williams with the Raiders, right? Yeah. And they have Mike Williams. Now,
Mike Williams has no speed, though. So
yeah, he'll go get it. I talked to Keenan after his ACL injury, and he said it actually turned out to be right. He said he felt better than he did before the ACL injury, and you're right, he had a great year after the ACL. But so we're in our tier 2 here, Geoff. What do we have next?
Well, the next is, and again, you can kind of roll it up and come up with a name. Let's go with 2 names. There's T. Higgins from Clemson and Jalen Reagor from TCU. We've spent some time talking about Jalen. We've told everybody that he's back to running in the 4.3 and 4.4. He shed that 10 pounds that he had put on before the combine. He's explosive. A scout told me he feels like Reagor is like a running back with the ball. When you put the ball in his hands, he becomes a running back, almost violently with the ball in his hands, which is a great quality, explosive, twitchy, all of that stuff. You kind of feel like that, that is what the Eagles are looking for, that explosion, that speed, that release. There's some questions about his ability, Adam, to catches, because he had some drops last year. But some of that is attributed to the drop-off in the quarterback play at that school.
Yes.
A lot of it, I would say, is attributed to that.
So from an NFL receivers coach, quote, really interesting player. We had a great interview with him lately. Also talked to him at the Combine. Great body control, fast. One of the best returners for this draft. I got to go to YouTube. Apparently some great clips there. Maybe I'll tweet one of them. His QB was terrible. Player was a little bit frustrated. Could tell, had his head down with some of the passes were so off. Got open repeatedly. Quarterback missed him. Learned the F slot position and Z positions pretty well. We think he could play either for us. Late 1, early 2. Wouldn't have a problem if we drafted him in the first round. I think that he will go higher than KJ Hamler. That's just my sense, talking about a dozen teams about both of these receivers.
Agree with you on that.
I would be very surprised if Hamler went ahead of him. Because you just talked about Reagor and how his body, he's incredibly physical. His body control is phenomenal. He's just not tall. He's 5'10" and 5'8". So what? Who cares? That doesn't really matter.
Right.
You like the kid, but as we all know, he's Monte Reagor's son.
Right.
Monte played for the Eagles. The area where I think he'll go is 21 to 35. That's kind of the pick number that I've been given.
Exactly the range I was told, late first, early second. And you talked about Monte Reagor playing for the Eagles. I think the bigger note, and we might have brought this up before, is that Monte first played with the Indianapolis Colts, and he was a teammate of Eagles wide receivers coach Aaron Moorhead.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes, they played on the same Colts team together. So there's some familiarity there. Yeah. I know we've reported that they've done FaceTime together. If you're asking me right now, like which guy, Justin Jefferson or Monte Reagor, feels more like the guy that the Eagles would be looking for, I would probably, Jalen Reagor. I would probably say Jalen, because we talk about the need for some explosion and some speed on the outside.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean he'll get
totally
picked higher.
agree.
I'm saying that.
Yeah, totally agree. For if you and I were picking for the Eagles, it's not even a debate. I would say, here's the deal. Here's what we're doing, Geoff. Tell me, argue with me, but you got 5 minutes to argue with me. If you can't win it, we're going with Reagor. Now, again, we're based on, and we're going to get the T. Higgins and Denzel Mims and Hamler and Ayuk and Chenal and Pittman. But this is a fun draft because they're tiers, but a lot of these guys, no one's can't miss, but just based on the opinions I'm getting from receiver coaches in particular, it's the first time I think that I've done this in 21 years. There's not one receivers coach or personnel guy that I've talked to that simply does not like it. Like they're players who you like more than others. They're players you're concerned about, like Antonio Gandy Golden, because he's extremely raw, didn't run well at the combine.
Right.
But you like his upside. Like they're guys who say all that, but they think he's got a chance if he's coached well.
Right. I mean, even a guy like Lynn Bowden, right, who is quarterback at Kentucky because they had injuries, but he's really a wide receiver and is going to get drafted as a wide receiver. He's raw in that regard because he just played quarterback, but people love what he can do with his speed and explosion. He'll probably go in the 3rd or 4th round.
Right. So let's get to T. Higgins, Geoff. What do you think?
So it's funny. I thought this would be a guy who would be completely off the Eagles board just because of the fact that of all the receivers we're going to talk about, he's the one that has the least amount of speed. And apparently I'm wrong about that. He has arguably the best catch radius of any of these wide receivers who are considered first or second round.
He's the biggest catch radius. Longest arms of any receiver, 34 and an eighth, which is unbelievably big.
That is
long. I mean,
wow, we were saying how Jefferson had 33 and a half, and that was considered good, and this guy's got even longer. Yeah,
right. That's what you want. I mean, because you could extend your hands away from the cornerback. That's actually very important. Pretty good football player, by the way.
Yeah. Is he Alshon?
He runs better than Alshon, as I'm told. He runs better than Alshon.
Okay.
He's not explosive, but he does win a lot.
Right.
He's an X receiver. There's no question about it. The report that I got on him: wins contested catches, hands are terrific, body control, inconsistent at times. Good football player, will go in the first. This receivers coach said that I'm sure that teams are conflicted on him because you see a lot of good tape and some tape that could be better than others where you're not so sure that he's a mid. He's going to go somewhere between like 15 and 30, somewhere in that area. No one I've talked to thinks he's special in any way, but they think he's a good football player.
Isn't that weird? Because I get the same feedback, and yet he's considered a first round pick.
Well, he's big, the catch radius, and the guy's productive, and he went big time program at Clemson. Very long arms, as we said. He's just not a pure runner. He's definitely an X receiver. He's not a movement Z. I don't see that at all.
Is he Allen Robinson? I'm just trying to.
Well, you know what's funny? It's funny. Allen Robinson did not run well before the draft, but man, he goes and gets it.
Yeah, 6'2",
That's actually
220.
a good one. You know what? I'd never thought about that one. Although I think Higgins is probably going to have to put some size on, some mass, because he's long as hell. Yeah, he's only 216. And he's just under 6'4", 6'3" and 5/8.
Right.
Good football player. I would be very surprised if he goes to the Eagles. And again, we're 2.5 weeks away. I'm going to give him my whole board for the Eagles the week of the draft. I cover 32 teams, not one, but I have a pretty good idea of. I feel like I have a good idea now. I understand the receivers of where the Eagles might go, but it's, again, when you're picking at 21, you've got to have a box of players that you like.
Right.
And then when we're talking about receivers, there are a lot of good ones there.
Absolutely. All right, so we just went through the top 6. Those were the top 2 tiers. We'll get into tier 3 here. But first, let's pause real quick for a word from our great sponsors. Hey, it's Geoff Mosher. Adam Caplan and I love using Anchor for our Inside the Birds podcast every week. It's so user-friendly, anyone can create their own podcast, and you should too. Just download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor gives you everything you need to start your own podcast from your phone or computer. Its creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast for a professional sound, and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you to Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and so many other platforms. It can be heard by everyone, just like Inside the Birds. You can also make money from your pod with no minimum listenership. What are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to create your podcast today. The Earn Your Leisure podcast, hosted by Rashard Bilal and Troy Millings, examines the latest trends in finance. Listen as the duo interviews entrepreneurs from various industries as they break down their business models and share some of their hardships and triumphs that they've experienced along the way. Want to learn about the real estate game? Unclear how the stock market works? They gotcha. Interested in starting a truck company, vending machine business, or investing in the mobile home market? Then check them out as they've got you covered. Earn Your Leisure is a college business class mixed with pop culture. So if you want to become better equipped in business, head over to Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and follow the Earn Your Leisure podcast today so you never miss an episode. These are guys who are probably going to go early second, but might sneak into the back end of the first round. Is that fair to say? With We're going to talk about Mims, we'll talk about Hamler and Brandon Ayuk. And I'm glad you brought up Ayuk because I wanted to make sure that Ayuk, because he's not I feel like he's kind of slipped through the cracks as far as recognition around here. And he's a name that I think we should all keep an eye on because he's got some real legit talent. But let's start with Hamler because he's probably of the three. I don't know if polarizing is the the right word, but feast or famine. He's got high ceiling, but he could also be the one that just because of his size just doesn't make it if he doesn't wind up with the right team.
Yeah, he's almost certainly going to only play the slot. He could be a movement Z. You can move him. You have to help him because he's small. He's one of the smallest receivers for this draft, 5'8", and let's see, 5'8" and 5'8", so just under 5'9", 178. Did not run at the combine. I'm told, I put this out a couple weeks ago, that he had a formal interview with the Eagles. I'm told he did really well.
Yeah,
on his interview. He's got
told the same.
Yeah, here's what I'm told on this kid from a receivers coach. Love his juice. We got in front of him. This one team told me at the combine. Love his juice and his passion for the game. Came in prepared. Smart kid. Little bit concerned about the drops. Too many of them last season. Hit hands where the ball was was there and he dropped it. No excuse. Going to need to work on that. This receivers coach said that we got a late one, early two on him. The reason why he'll get on the field early, even if they've built his body up yet, is because he could return. They see him as a returner in addition to being a receiver.
Oh yeah, I mean, this guy, you put him in space, Adam. You've seen it. It's not. You don't need a scout to tell you.
Juice. He's got some serious leap of juice.
Now, interestingly, a team that interviewed him told me they were almost taken aback at first because when he sat down, he was very soft spoken and almost, and this is a direct quote, to the point where you couldn't hear him. But once the film started rolling, you could see his FBI, meaning football intelligence. So apparently they turned the film on and he got going, and you started to see the juice that you're talking about. But it was interesting to hear that he was that soft spoken to start the interview. Here's another thing that I find really interesting. His high point, his ceiling is a T.Y. Hilton. This is what a scout told me, and his low point would be Philip Dorsett, another speed receiver who
was overdrafted, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. But I would say this. If he winds up just being Philip Dorsett, it's not the biggest bust in the world because Dorsett's played in the league for several years. And, he's what, six? This is his fifth or sixth year now?
Yeah, he's now with the Seahawks, talking to them. They were looking for speed.
Right. There have been far worse players, I guess my point is, than Philip Dorsett. So,
yeah. Dorsett had exceptional speed. This kid with a ball in his hands, his acceleration is phenomenal. He's right up there with any of the receivers in this draft, other than Ruggs. And this kid, his burst when he catches it, his routes are not bad. He's a hard worker. A lot of good from him. Almost all of his catches last season were in the slot.
Right.
But he can play outside because he did in the past. You need to understand what he is and what he's not. You're going to have to really play him in the slot because Deshaun learned how to play on the outside fairly early on because Deshaun came in as a pretty good route runner, though, off the field, he needed to grow up a little bit. Deshaun was taller. Yes, he was thin, but he was also able to eat up ground better than Hamler did. Deshaun Jackson, see, the thing with Deshaun is you can make the argument, other than Randy Moss, he's the best deep threat in NFL history. He just got robbed, unfortunately, because of his injury history. He could still run. Can you imagine Hamler in the slot, Deshaun, and then get someone else who could run on the outside? It would be the NFL's fastest receiver corps.
Oh, that would be unbelievable. That would be so much to go from what they had last year to that.
I know. The slowest. Greg Cosell said it was the slowest team he saw on tape on offense.
Well, I want to leave Hamler with this. I asked one scout, I said, what about Tavon Austin? Is there any chance that Hamler just becomes the next Tavon Austin, a guy who can only be a gadget because he's just not big enough? And he said that he felt that Hamler's intelligence, his passion for the game, his smarts will make him more so than a Tavon Austin. He said, hey, look, the potential's always there for anybody that, they just don't translate. But I don't think that they fear the famine part of the feast or famine here as much as they appreciate what there is to feast on, if that's fair enough to say.
Yes, and one thing to top it off is you're going to be able to run gadget stuff with him like Austin, but he's way more skilled than Austin.
Yeah.
Austin, so many coaches that I talked to who coached him over the years, they were going to be the one to get him not to be a gadget player, and it never worked. But I think he's going to be more than that. But I think this kid Hamler also needs to get stronger physically. Now, but one other thing before we move on here, he did make some good catches inside.
He
Like,
did.
because he's small, he actually showed some toughness, but you have to understand how to use him or it's not going to work. You need to understand what he is and he's not.
Right. I forgot. I wanted to mention that. I'm glad you said that. I was told by a couple of people that you need to put this guy with a quarterback who's fairly accurate downfield, because if you put him with a quarterback who can't hit anybody 30 or 40 yards downfield, then they're going to game plan for him to be an across the middle guy and try to funnel the defense that way. You want to be able to accentuate his strength. And
yes. And he's not shown the ability to track the ball deep. Like, in terms of, if you look at earlier in his career when he played a little bit more outside,
right.
He's not used to it. By the way, he did have, as a high school senior, he did have an ACL reconstruction, but he's fine, I'm told. No physical issues. And you're right in terms of polarizing, because teams are going to be mixed on how to use him. That's why if he doesn't go in the first round, he's going to go in the early second. It's just that you're not sure where you're going to line him up, and you're not sure how much he could help you early on.
Right. And by the way, because of the lack of tape doesn't mean he can't do it. If this guy shows a team that drafts him that he actually can beat a press coverage on the outside, because, with his size, it's a big question, and he can track the ball deep, what a steal he's going to be. He's going to be an amazing player if he can do those things.
Yep. I agree with you. So that's the next guy.
Let's move on to Denzel Mims, a guy who probably entered the pre-draft process as a 3 or a 4, and now
probably a mid-second to early third. Yes.
Yeah. And now I'm being told could be, again, as we mentioned, late first, early second type of player. From what I gather, it comes down to his speed and his release. He has excellent speed, excellent release, can get off the line of scrimmage, can get away from the contact. And that's what makes him a little bit, that's what's really risen his stock over the last month or so.
A quote from receivers coach: super fast for his size, best route runner we've seen in years on tape from Baylor. As you should know, very few teams run poor routes in Baylor on tape for going back many years. Really good Senior Bowl week. He impressed us. Good kid. Needs to get stronger. Needs 8 to 10 pounds on. Once he does, he could be a stud. Late 1, early 2. Not sure if he'll start week 1 for us, because he needs to get stronger and he needs time to develop. So here's the thing. I don't know it for a fact, but I just, my sense is from talking to Eagles sources, he would not be their guy at 21. Now, the Eagles also could trade down. They certainly could, or another team. And I have 7 teams needing a receiver from 21 to 31. Some of these teams that have Mims as a late 1. Now, when I say late 1, folks, if you go by your tier, it's probably going to be the next year as we just lined up. That's probably going to be from 25 to 35. You could trade down and get this kid. A lot of teams are super intrigued with this kid. And boy, look, the time speed, he probably plays. Let's see, his combine time was 4.38 for a guy at 6'2" and 7/8 and 207 is phenomenal. He has the size capability to probably get up to 220. Now, you're not going to ask him to do that year 1, most likely,
right? But
this kid, he needs time. He's a very intriguing prospect. Absolutely dominated Senior Bowl, which is a very good sign, because that's where McLaurin did very well.
Yeah. And you just hit the nail on the head with why people are enamored with him, despite the school and despite the question of, because again, route running and contested catches, I told, were not his strength yet. You mentioned good route runner for Baylor, but you also mentioned that Baylor doesn't produce a lot of good route runners. So overall, when you compare him to others, his route running is a little questionable. But when you say a guy can run a 4.38 at 6'2" and 207 pounds,
6'2" and 7/8. Yeah,
I'm sorry, 6'2". That makes guys drool, and deservedly so. That's a hell of an attribute to have at that size.
He does. He needs a little bit further development. And then let's go to because what we're going to do, Geoff, if you're okay with it, I think we need to finish off on AU, because we can't go an hour and a half here.
No.
Our next show will be the next group, tiers 4, 5, and 6, and 7 to finish off receivers. But let's go to Ayuk, and he's 5'11" and 5'8", 205 at the combine. He ran a 4.5. A receivers coach told me he placed about 4.3, 4.4. Should go off the board 25 to 40. Here's the receiver coach's quote: "Love him, late first for us. Great route runner, great kid. Had unbelievable juice and passion in an interview with him at the combine. Strong with ball in his hands, physical punisher. Could be a kick returner, punt returner. wired very well. It helps that he's coached by NFL people.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about my man Herm Edwards, at my former teammate at ESPN, and Antonio Pierce is a friend, and all those guys that also Kevin Mawai, I think, was there. That's good. That actually helps. And I don't think teams will be scared. With N'Keal Harry got a bad ankle injury last year.
Right.
That's why he didn't play. When he came back, he wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
But Harry's going to be a good player. I don't worry about him, but that's not going to have any impact. This is the kid that I got on lately, Geoff, and I think he makes it late one. I'll tell you what. I would take him over Justin Jefferson if I were the Eagles, but I'm not the Eagles.
So you think he goes higher than Hamler and Mims then?
I do.
Okay. I'm not. Listen,
I could be wrong.
It matches. I asked an AFC personnel guy. I said, name me your favorite wide receiver in this class, not named Judy, Ruggs, Lamb, Rager, or Jefferson. He said, Ayuk. Ayuk or Ayuk?
Ayuk. By the way, with Mims, he might wind up being 3 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
It might go Judy, Lamb, Mims, depending on drafts him, because he's got that type of his upside is ridiculously great. He just needs time. He
does. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And with Ayuk, I guess the only knock is, as you just mentioned, that 2 years ago, he was not a high target, high volume. He wasn't much on the map, and that's because they had N'Keal Harry, and N'Keal had a wonderful year and was a first round pick. But he had his chance this past year, Ayuk, and did really well.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing where he goes. And folks, we're even gonna have more when I get stuff from general managers, more personnel directors, just to get an idea of what they think of these players. It's a fun year because this is the best we've seen. I don't know, Geoff. He had 2 years. He only had the 2 years of production at ASU.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing I love, though. You could say all you want about their offense. He averaged over 18 yards per catch.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
so
he's
pretty damn impressive.
I said, what do you love so much about him? He said, speed, hands, run after catch, and strength. That's 4 pretty good qualities to have right there.
And he plays way better in a 4.5. He ran a 4.5 at the combat. He plays way better than that.
Right.
And he's going to be fun. To me, if you and I were picking, it's if it comes down to Jefferson or Ayuk for Philly or any other team that we would be running, I'm taking Ayuk 9 times out of 10.
You taking him at 21? Or are you just trading down?
For Philly, I feel like he's going to go a little bit later, because what happens is, Geoff, I wouldn't necessarily take him at 20. It wouldn't be a bad pick. Actually, be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going by your board, he's probably going to be a little bit lower, and that's why you got to stick with your tier. Because if you go to the next tier, then we've got Sims, Hamler, Ayuk, and then of course every team's going to have not just these receivers, but could be a corner there, could be a DN, whoever else.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't want to cheat your tier, because if you do that, then you're going with a lower graded player, and you got to be careful. That means you're drafting only for need.
How about you go get Jefferson in the first round, and then you trade maybe a later pick to move up in the second round and get yourself Ayuk?
I would do that. I would actually do Mims or Ayuk. I am so intrigued by Denzel Mims.
Uh-huh.
I am. See, the thing is, the draft is never about certainty. It's about projecting.
Right.
All you could do project. That's why I always say it's never about year one. It's really not. Obviously, if you're a team like the Eagles that needs a guy to play early, yes, you want to get something out of them, and they will. But you want this guy to grow with Carson Wentz, whoever they're going to draft. Man, I'd love to see. How about this? Jefferson and Mims.
Oh, that would be incredible. That would be unbelievable. It's so funny. Hamler's going to be that guy that teams get scared about the size and the fact that he didn't run his 40, and is going to go lower than people think, somewhere in like mid to late 2, right? And he's going to go to a good team like the Packers or the Saints, who know how to use him and have a really good quarterback, and he's going to be unbelievable.
I know he's going to be a catch guy. So on the next show, before we get out of here, Geoff, when we go over tiers 4, 5, and 6, Laviska Shenault, we got great stuff on him. Michael Pittman Jr., really intriguing player. Brian Edwards, who unfortunately has come back from a broken foot. He would be he would be in tier 3 with us if he didn't break his foot.
Oh, and I think Shenault would probably be in the higher tier if he didn't have hurt too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chase Claypool, Devin Duvernay, who I just talked to on series, he was great.
Nice.
Tyler Johnson, Van Jefferson, Gabriel Davis, Ganey Golden, the kid from Memphis, that / running back wide receiver, Antonio Gibson.
Right.
We have an exclusive for our listeners. I have from the Memphis coaching source. I've got a scouting report on them, so I'm I'm going to put that out this week in my note. I'm going to do a notebook for this week. I'm going to put it out there. But that, man, I love doing these things, man. I when we started doing these shows, I had no idea we'd be able to do this, but I'm so glad we're doing it because I think everyone could get something out of this.
Absolutely. So I look forward to doing the next pod and going through those next set of wide receivers. Want to thank all of our friends, especially PHLSportsNation.com, enhancing the fan experience as always with their coverage of the Eagles, Phillies, Flyers, Sixers. Their content never stops. They keep going through the drought. So hat tip to them. They've got great podcasts as well. So make sure you're checking out PHLSportsNation.com. Of course, check out 97.3 ESPN. Listen to Mike Gill from 2 to 6. Make sure you're on their website, 973ESPN.com. You can read Sean McMullen's stuff there. He does a great job covering the Eagles too. Download their free mobile app at 973ESPN.com. Of course, we thank our friend Hunter Brody. He helps produce this podcast. Check out his YouTube page, Sports Talk with Broads. And also check him out on Twitter at Broads81 on Twitter. And he's always doing some great things, putting out some great content on Philadelphia sports. So remember, go to InsideTheBirds.com. Check out the Inside the Birds YouTube page. Become a subscriber. And if you leave us on your podcast platform, give us a 5-star review and leave a question, and I promise we will answer it. As always, we thank you for flying with us Inside the Birds. If you're listening to this, you obviously like podcasts, and you probably like music too. On Spotify, you can listen to all of that in one place for free. That's right, you don't need a premium account. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcast so you never miss an episode. You can download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are. You can easily share what you're listening to with your friends via Spotify's integrations with social media platforms like Instagram. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now. Just search for Inside the Birds on the Spotify app or browse podcasts in the Your Library tab. And follow me, Geoff Mosher, so you never miss an episode of Inside the Birds. Spotify is the world's leading music streaming service, and now it can be your go-to for podcasts too.